It's great to be in the SEC. Thank you for tuning in to the SEC Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Warren. Today, I'm joined by one of the four horsemen of the aROCKalypse, my good friend, Andrew Turner. We break down week 6 around the SEC. We go through my power rankings. We recap the game of the week, Tennessee at LSU. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SEC Recap. Check out the articles on our Medium page that go along with this podcast. Hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. We're talking week 6 around the SEC, highlights, takeaways. This is our week 6 recap. By the way, you can catch the accompanying article for this podcast on our Twitter page, on our Medium page, sec-recap.medium.com. Looking at the results from week 6. So, Vols handled business in Tiger Stadium, basically turned it into Neyland South. Arkansas continues their tumble. Rebels shut down a really hot Vandy first half. Surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of people. Kentucky, as David told us last week, they fumbled away an easy conference win, in my opinion, versus South Carolina. And Alabama survived the Aggies in what was really, I think, an ugly game. Yeah. I'm joined by my good friend, Andrew Turner. We're going to dive into the top 25, talk some SEC East, SEC West standings. So Tennessee moves up to number 6. I think that's the highest they've been ranked since, I don't know, like got to be the early 2000s.
Yeah. Or I don't know, 2016. We had a pretty good ranking. I don't remember how high we got.
I think we might have been, I don't know if we were top 10 in 2016. I know we were like near there. We might have been around like 11 or something, but I'm not sure we cracked the top 10 under Butch.
Yeah, I thought we had last time that we started 5-0 was in 2016. So I thought that would give us probably the most recent good start to our season. I'd have to look back and see how we finished that year.
That was wasn't that we started 5-0 and then we went on the road to Texas A&M and I think lost like an overtime game at A&M, right? And then I think we like had to come back and play Bama and got beat up pretty bad. That was that year that everything that could go wrong just started to go wrong.
But it's certainly
like,
a great start to a season that I think I will definitely cherish and remember for a long time.
Georgia moves back to number 1. Alabama drops to number 3 with Ohio State sandwiched in the middle. Ole Miss kind of rounds out the top 10 for the SEC, sitting at number 9. So SEC keeps 4 teams in the top 10. Kentucky dropped as they should. I'm kind of surprised they're still ranked, to be honest. And then Mississippi State moved up to number 16. In the East, it's the Bulldogs and the Vols sitting on top of the East. The middle of the East is really a race to mediocrity. You've got South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, all just sitting right there together at 1 and 2 in the conference. And then at the bottom, you've got Vandy and Missouri. And I think Missouri might be the worst team in the SEC period this year. What do you think?
Yeah, and I agree. I wonder what that says about Missouri and Georgia, because Georgia really did not show up, or, Missouri just had the game of their life. But I agree. I mean, I can't see, other than Vanderbilt, I think those are probably the worst 2 teams in the SEC right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's a little bit of both in that Mizzou-Georgia game. I think Mizzou defensively played the game of its season, and Georgia was kind of sleepwalking through that game. So I think it was a combination of both that led to that outcome. They definitely didn't repeat at Florida. I put out a tweet earlier today that kind of went through what I thought was the most important conference game remaining on each SEC team schedule. And for Missouri, I put Vanderbilt, because literally the Mizzou-Vandy game is going to be the game to determine who doesn't have to be last in the SEC. And that's just where Missouri is right now, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I keep trying to think about the next week with us playing Bama, but yeah, you start looking past the week 6 schedule, and you start wondering if we can make it through all the games we're supposed to make it through, no matter how this one comes out. Have you heard about the safety who's got arrested?
Yeah, so I wanted to save that for a little bit later.
Okay.
Definitely. When we get into Tennessee Bama, we'll circle back around to that. That's a crazy story.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is everybody's just kind of speculating right now because we don't have a lot of details. But I definitely do want to cover that. Okay. So in the West, you got Alabama and Ole Miss sitting on top. I think, this is a big game this weekend between Alabama and Tennessee, like maybe one of the biggest games of the season, like regular season. But it really seems likely to me right now that Ole Miss and Alabama are going to be playing for the SEC West, no matter what happens.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't see another team rising up.
I mean, maybe Mississippi State, but they've already got that one loss to LSU, and they don't play Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl till the very end of the season. So when Ole Miss plays Bama, like that could literally be the game for the SEC West. And how crazy would that be? How crazy would it be for Tennessee to beat Alabama this weekend, or really no matter what happened, win or lose, beat Georgia and end up playing Ole Miss for the SEC title?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about injuries, anything can happen. You hate for injuries to, shape a season like that. But just like Bryce Young and Cedric Tillman, these are major players that if they don't play, it definitely changes the score. And
it does. And like Bryce Young's status isn't definitive yet. Like by all accounts, they're very discreet about it. We're doing everything we can. It's very fluid. I'll let you know when we know something, kind of thing. But if he were 100% playing, I think we'd know it by now. So I'm not sure what his status is going to be, but he's also got to think about his NFL career because dude's going to be drafted in the first round. And it's like, do you want to come back and play a few more regular season SEC games, or do you want to get that first round money?
Yeah, that's a lot to weigh.
Yeah, more on that here in just a little bit. Then in the West, you got Auburn, A&M, Arkansas, just kind of rounding out the bottom there. I mean, here's what stands out most to me. Now that we're like kind of at the midway point through the SEC season, through the college football season, you have what I would consider 2, maybe 3 elite teams. And I say maybe 3 because right now I might put Tennessee in that elite category depending on what happens this weekend. And they don't even have to beat Alabama, but if they play a really good game against Alabama, I'm putting them in that category in the East. It's like up to now, Tennessee has been in that middle to bottom category in the SEC as a whole, if you were just to rank all 14 teams. But if you're competitive with Bama this weekend or you beat Bama, I'm going to say there's 3 elite teams in the SEC. And Ole Miss, I think, is right there. I would put Tennessee and Ole Miss in the same tier, but I just like what I've seen from Tennessee a lot more. They've also played a more impressive schedule this year. Then that middle, dude, you could put like 6 teams in the middle. Like take Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, LSU, Auburn, Mississippi State they'd probably be at the top of that.
Yeah.
But there'd be about 5 or 6 teams kind of right in the middle. Maybe A&M, but I mean they're kind of a dumpster right now. And then like at the bottom, no, they can't. And then at the bottom, it's Vandy, Mizzou, Auburn, and like surprisingly Arkansas to a degree.
Yeah, and you look at in terms of the SEC West, I'm looking at your your table here. The only 2 teams that have over 100 points for are Bama, of course, at 128, and Arkansas, surprisingly, like you said, 108. But points against Arkansas, 142.
Yeah, that kind of tells you. And look at the other teams, even over in the East, that have given up over 100 points in conference, it's not the company you want to keep.
No.
It's Vanderbilt and South Carolina. That's kind of who Arkansas is in league with right now, unfortunately. And Texas A&M isn't far behind that. You look at the teams at the top, which again are Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss. And Georgia's, only given up 39 points in conference. The next to them is Tennessee. Of course, Tennessee's played one less conference game than Georgia, than Alabama. I mean, that just kind of shows you that degree of separation right now. If there's any doubt in anybody's mind, I know there's Kentucky fans and South Carolina fans and Florida fans out there who want to act like Tennessee, like in all that, oh, your schedule's not hard. The teams y'all beat aren't even ranked anymore. But dude, just look at the stats. Like it's Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and then literally everybody else right now. Let's talk Georgia really quick. Georgia, Auburn on the road at Georgia. I thought this was a very good Georgia team. Like they finally looked like Georgia again, taking advantage of a very bad Auburn team in a blowout win.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching them kind of get back on track because, I mean, let's face it, if it comes down to the regular ending that we normally get at the end of the season, I hope Georgia beats Alabama. So, and they do look better than Alabama in a lot of different ways. I think offensively, when they want to move up the field in the third or fourth quarter, I mean, they're just trucking, and their defense, just when they show up to play, they can really just shut a team out. They stuttered a week ago with Missouri, but they seem to be back.
They look back. Their offense is very balanced. 292 rushing yards, 208 passing yards. And one thing I thought was interesting is I went back and looked at their game history this season. They're getting the ball to at least 10 different receivers every single game, including the running backs. When you look at other teams and compare that to other teams, like take Tennessee. I know we're going to talk a lot about Tennessee, but dude, Tennessee gets the ball to like 5 or 6 different people a game. And that's it. It's like the same 5 or 6 dudes every game. Most teams are like that. Georgia's getting the ball to 10 different receivers every single game. That's really deep. Defenses have to respect every single pass catcher, including the running backs on that field. They've got like monster tight ends. That's just, Georgia's still good. I don't care like that they kind of faltered against Kent State and Missouri. That's still a really good team and a really good offense.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, buckle up.
Yeah, Vandy better buckle up. All right, let's talk Tennessee and LSU. This is a beatdown. Brian Kelly ain't eat his red beans.
Look at Brian Kelly. I know he ate his red beans. Brian, I know you ate your red beans last Monday, and look what happened. We thriving. Whole team on them red beans.
Love it.
Brian Kelly ain't eat his red beans. He forgot his red beans for the Tennessee game. I don't know if you remember last week, but when we were on, I read that quote where he was asked about Tennessee's offense. He said, they don't go in motion a lot. They don't do different formations a lot. So it's pretty simple. We just got to line up, play defense, and we'll be good. And I was like, man, it doesn't feel like Brian Kelly's watched any Tennessee film at all. And dude, you got to see more of that game than I did. They did not look ready for anything that Tennessee wanted to do on offense.
No, and in terms of like a heavyweight bout, it was like a massive haymaker just right out the gate because they muffed the kickoff. We get it immediately. We run up the field in just 4 to 6 plays, score a touchdown, and just we never look back. We're just scoring constantly. They're playing Rocky Top every few minutes. You can see the frustration building in the building with all the fans. And I didn't feel bad for him. I enjoyed every second of it.
I didn't feel bad for him either. And the thing is, the game was never in question because I went back and watched it. I didn't get to catch any of the game till the fourth quarter. I mean, I was following the scores, but I wanted to go back and actually watch the game for myself. Dude, when you go back, it was never in question. Like from that special teams play at the very beginning of the game through the rest of the game. Like Tennessee was in complete control of that game. I cannot believe they were only a 3-point road favorite. Like LSU did not look like they belonged in the same league as Tennessee.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised that they didn't show up like people were expecting them to. You know, we had a lot of momentum, and then we started having to kick field goals, but they were having to kick field goals after several drives where they just had to punt. And there was one drive where you thought they were going to score, and they go for it on like the 10-yard line or 11-yard line. And
yeah,
I thought that was a bad spot, or if we just really got them, you know, but that was a moment where just, again, we just recentered the momentum our way. And then, of course, we set ourselves up to score one more time before and then we came out like, I think everybody memorized the several plays. We just came out and just touchdown immediately, and it was like, all right, I guess we'll play these next 2 quarters out, but we all know how this is going to end.
Yeah, I think it just says what Tennessee's offense does to get in the heads of coaching staffs. You know that offense is going to be super aggressive, and if you give them anything on special teams, it's just going to make it that much worse. So, you know, going for it on 4th down, like he really felt like he had to do that because there was no way that they were going to be able to keep up otherwise. And as a fan, that makes you feel so confident in your team, knowing that you're getting in the head of other teams, players and coaches, thinking that like if we don't get out to a fast start early, they're just going to leave us in the dust.
Yeah. I told you I had a few numbers. One of my numbers for this podcast episode is 502. That's 502 offensive yards. You know, when a team like Tennessee is throwing and running and playing so quickly, you have a few options, and you could either slow the game down and you run the ball, which we have been playing defensively this season very well against the run. It's actually the pass that we're more a little more concerned about. But, you know, if you think about why we have so many more passing yards against us, it's because teams are trying to keep up with us. So, like, they have to throw, you know, more than they probably want to. Another number I want to throw out there, 239. That's 239 passes from Hooker without an interception. It's been crazy to see him just take the risks that he has. But I was talking to somebody today, you know, whoever their quarterback coach is, clearly him and Milton, they coached them to throw it too far, but never short, because they just seem to be so consistent this season. I'm proud of them.
Yeah. It's insane. His consistency, like how well he takes care of the football, like his decision making is so good. I mean, that offense is designed to get the ball out fast. Like that's how it works. So it's a lot of bubble screens, and you know they're working in the RPO, like some option reads now, or some option runs, like that speed option they ran with Dylan Sampson. They're adding a lot more tools to the toolbox this season versus last year. Whereas last year, it just felt like they went fast all the time because that's what they could do. Yeah. Like that was kind of the only thing they could do. And now you're seeing them like really branch out. You're seeing Hooker run that offense so much more smoothly. Like he's so in control. The ball goes exactly where they want it to go almost every single time. It's, if people haven't watched Tennessee play and they just kind of see highlights on Twitter, dude, you need to do yourself a favor and just go watch the LSU game. Go watch, you know, the Florida game. Watch the way Hendon Hooker just takes over a ball game. That's why he's in the Heisman conversation right now. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah, and shout out to, you know, our offensive line. They did so well giving cover for him, except for that one time when Hooker took just a monster shot. I was worried about him. He did not seem like he was too shook up, but at the same time, I know everyone's really worried when someone takes a shot like that. But Jabari Small and Jalen Wright, both of them are, I think during that LSU game, I think they both had right at 5 or 6 yards per carry. And I mean, when you have your guys running like that, I mean, that just opens up the receiving core so much more. And Brew McCoy, man, talk about stepping up after Cedric Tillman's been out. really proud of his production. I think he had like 140 yards.
He's done more than you could have possibly hoped that he would do, especially in the absence of Cedric Tillman. Yeah, dude, if they're running for 5 yards a carry, they're going to win just about every ball game they play. Like that's 10-2 type stats right there. All right, we'll come back and talk some more Tennessee when we get to the Tennessee-Bama game. But LSU-Tennessee was my primary game of the week. Wasn't great for LSU fans, but it was great for Tennessee fans. All right, I want to get into South Carolina and Kentucky here. So I've trashed South Carolina quite a bit this season, not really intentionally, but I've just never bought into the offseason hype. Like, I still don't think Shane Beamer's a great coach. I think he's a good special teams coach, and he head coaches like a special teams coach. Like, he's a hype man. That's why he's always fist pumping on the sidelines. Like, he's, fist pumping when they pick up a third down, and it just doesn't read like the kind of personality and demeanor that you see from a lot of other head coaches. But in this game, I will give them credit because they showed up to play and Kentucky didn't. And I don't think for Kentucky, it was all just because of Will Levis not being available. I think a lot of it was Kentucky's total lack of defense. I think it was South Carolina taking complete advantage of the opportunity. I still don't think the Gamecocks have played a complete game this season because there was a lot in that Kentucky game that was still ugly, but they showed up. They whipped a Kentucky team that I've had pegged as overrated for all year. So congrats to the Gamecocks. I'm going to rip into Kentucky now. So before that game, I wrote on Twitter that Will Levis has played every snap at quarterback so far this season. Even in those FBS and FCS games that they were winning, 31-0, they never got that backup quarterback snaps. He came into this game with 0 meaningful reps. And I was like, this is probably going to haunt them if Levis can't play today. It did. And I just don't understand that from a coaching standpoint, from a personnel management standpoint. Like, why would you not get your backup quarterback any quality snaps in a game, especially games against like FCS opponents or MAC opponents that you're beating by 3 scores? It just makes no sense. This should not have been a meaningful game for Kentucky, but their O-line is atrocious. It can't block a sneeze. And Will Levis he's been sacked like 24 times. I mean, he's living in the dirt. Golly, he's living in the dirt with broken fingers and a boot on his foot. Like, it's just abysmal. They were 3 of 12 on third downs. They only put up 299 total yards against the 4th worst defense in the league. The offensive line just can't. I mean, they cannot give their quarterback any protection. I don't see how they sat as a top 10 team for like 2 or 3 weeks, because you saw this coming. You're like, okay, if Will Levis is playing, they're a top 25 team. But if Will Levis is out, this is not even a top 25 team. Like, this was a fan base that thought they were going to legitimately contend for the SEC East this year. It was all over Twitter. Like, they thought that there was a chance that they would compete with Georgia this year for the East, that they would go to Atlanta. They were going to come to Knoxville this year and beat Tennessee. They were going to beat Georgia, South Carolina, Mizzou, Vandy. Like, they were just going to walk through those games. Dude, I'm giving Kentucky a 0% chance of winning in Knoxville against this Tennessee team. Are you kidding me? So. 0. Yeah. I'm saying 0% chance they're competitive with Georgia. And I think Mississippi State is going to roll into town and absolutely torch them this week. Torch them. The team that I saw on Saturday might not even be able to beat Missouri on the road. And I think this team is now lucky to get to 7-5 on the season. And they had a cupcake schedule. Andrew, this is a basketball school. Calipari was right. Kentucky is a basketball school.
Yeah, it's so funny week to week. It's so funny how you can shift so quickly on a team. It's almost like cryptocurrency or something. When it's bad, it's really bad. When it's good, it's really good. But like, looking at their season, they, like you were talking about, they have 4 wins in a row. one of them being on the road at Florida, and you're thinking, okay, you're 4-0. And then they go into that Ole Miss game. And, I hate to say that Lynn Kiffin was right, but I mean, he said, only one of us is coming out of this still undefeated. And that was an excellent game. It came down to 3 points, I mean, it was Kentucky is their game to lose, honestly. And last week on the podcast, I said, look, this is still a good team. They're going to bounce back. Yeah. David was like, nah, I don't see it. South Carolina, they when I'm looking at the box score, because I didn't really see much of it, I was kind of keeping up with it online. Basically, I think South Carolina hit them in the mouth during the first quarter, and then they came out in the third quarter right out of halftime and just hit them again. Scored 10 points and held them to 0. That was all it took. And all of a sudden, you can see it on their face. They're just thinking, are we about to lose to South Carolina at home? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. That's exactly it. All right. We'll round out the East here and move on to the West. Not a lot to say about Florida and Mizzou. With Florida, it's just kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. They have a ton of talent, but they just have not put it all together yet consistently week to week. 1 week they have an offensive game like they had at Tennessee where Anthony Richardson plays out of his mind. And then they're like this past weekend, they were 3 of 11 on third downs and had less than 300 yards of total offense. I think they could probably beat Kentucky if they played them today with everything that's happened, like current roster injuries, all that. But not even Florida can't even really make a compelling case for like third best team in the East right now. And then with Vandy, I know a lot of people saw that first half against Ole Miss, and credit to them. Like they really played a solid first half. I think might have been up at the half. But when you look at the drive summary for the second half, it's Vanderbilt punt, fumble, punt, downs. They got a late touchdown. Ole Miss just kind of ran away with it. They just had the dudes. In the SEC, you got to have the dudes to finish games. It's what's hurt Tennessee in past years. Like Bama was a 1-score game going into the fourth quarter last year, but Bama had the dudes. Tennessee didn't.
Yep. And the only thing we were kind of wondering last week with this Florida-Mizzou game was going to be, Mizzou showed up against Georgia. I mean, Florida, they still seem to crush the teams that they're supposed to crush at the moments that you expect them that they would historically.
Yeah, what I think the last thing I'll say on this one is from this game, Mizzou actually went 9 of 17 on third downs, while Florida just went 3 of 11. And Mizzou actually outgained Florida 370 to 297. And they had the ball for 13 more minutes than Florida. So what is happening is Mizzou is converting third downs and they're gaining yards, but they're terrible in the red zone and they can't convert any of their drives to meaningful points. They just don't have a productive offense. Like they have the pieces of a good offense, but they just can't convert to points. All right, let's go to the West. We don't need to go through all these teams because we've already kind of talked about them. A lot of them had cross-divisional matchups. We talked Ole Miss, Vandy. I mean, Jonathan Mingo, I'll just say 9 receptions for 247 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's a monster performance. Single game receiving record. Don't know that can be repeated. I mean, it was Vanderbilt. But that's a big time performance. LSU, we already talked about. They just didn't even show up for the game. Auburn, we touched on it with Georgia. They got blasted. We'll hit Arkansas, Mississippi State, and then Alabama A&M. Mississippi State, I think, is for real. If there was a third team in the West, I think it's Mississippi State this year. First couple of weeks of the season, I thought it could be Arkansas, but man, they've just not looked good. I haven't watched a ton of Arkansas football, but I watched the Alabama game. I watched the A&M game. They've just taken back-to-back beatdowns from SEC West opponents. I just had to drop them in my rankings. 3 conference losses. 2 of them were absolute ass whippings. They're just kind of sliding right now.
Talking about Arkansas, they have to play defense. You cannot give up 140 points over 2 or 3 games. That's just, you can't. I don't care how good your offense is. You can't be giving up points like that. It's time to take Kentucky and LSU out of the top 25. Take Arkansas out. Keep the big boys in there. like Tennessee and Ole Miss and Alabama, and we're going to put Mississippi State in there. I think that was appropriate.
Yeah.
It's time for them to be in the top 25 based on their performance so far in the 22-2 season. It's been a great season so far for Mississippi State. We'll see if they can hang on. Who'd you say they're playing this weekend? Who they playing?
Oh, they go to Kentucky.
Oh, man. That's right. So Kentucky's probably going to take another L unless they can figure out some more offense. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, they weren't even really playing defense. I mean, South Carolina's offense is not good. Statistically, it's not a good offense. And they put up 3 scores on Kentucky. So I just think Mississippi State's gonna go do whatever they want to Kentucky. We'll round this out with my power rankings. Now, these are like my personal power rankings. I take into consideration things like home wins, away wins, ranked wins, even if the team is no longer ranked, where they ranked when you play them, win margin. So margin of victory, was it 1 score, 2 scores? Was it a 1-point win? All of that. And so for the first time this season, I'm actually moving Tennessee into the number 1 spot. Now, that's not saying that I definitively believe that Tennessee is better than Georgia or Alabama. What this says to me is that they've played a better schedule. They have 3 ranked wins, 2 of which are road wins, and 2 of which are conference wins, which is more than anybody else in the country right now. And so I think just based on strength of schedule alone, the quality of those wins, one of which was the blowout of LSU, I just think that is deserving of the number 1 spot this week in the power rankings. At number 2, I got Georgia. They seem to get it back together versus Auburn. To me, that's strong enough to take that number 2 spot. Alabama, despite that close call versus Texas on the road, versus Texas A&M at home, I think they're still undisputedly one of the best 3 teams in the country for now, and certainly like one of the top teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I would agree. And you'd kind of touched on it a little bit with like how you win matters. And I don't think we talked too much about the Alabama Texas A&M game, but that was so depressing to see Texas A&M storm all the way up the field.
Yeah,
they were on the 2-yard line, man, and you're just thinking, this is it. This all they have to do is just punch through. They actually have a fairly good running back, and I don't know who called that play. Or if they got fired after they did, but like it was just so sad. I mean, just like he threw it over to the sideline. They had no chance. And after that, I just thought this was their game to win. And then they just did not give themselves a good play. So I really think they could have. I think that's really more my main point there. But, it reminded me a lot of that Texas game. So Alabama is really not crushing people like they should be. And I think that that's probably hurt their rankings a little bit. I think that's definitely why a lot of people think Tennessee has a chance to win.
I'll tell you whose decision that play was. That was Jimbo Fisher, because the DB covering Evan Stewart, the receiver for Texas A&M, looked over to the sideline and saw Jimbo Fisher mouthing Evan. So he knew exactly where that pass was going. He just had the dude covered, and the pass wasn't even into the end zone. That's been talked about a lot. I'm not an X's and O's guy, but I think everybody saw that and just instantly realized with the game on the line, you couldn't have called a worse play. Ole Miss at number 4, because they're the only other undefeated SEC team. They did beat Kentucky at home. They've gone on the road and performed well. They have convincing wins, which matters. And if Mississippi State hadn't had that 1 loss to LSU, they could potentially be at that number 4 spot. But I've got them number 5. If there's a 5th team in the SEC, it's definitely Mississippi State. And then number 6 through 9 could literally be any one of these teams. LSU, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Florida. Like, pick one. I think maybe Arkansas. But I think like they could all beat each other on any given weekend. And as I said earlier, they're all just kind of fighting for middle of the pack.
Yeah, they've all had their moments. I think Florida is probably better than some of those teams. I think LSU plays better than they did against us on most Saturdays. Texas A&M, I don't think that they're just the best team this year or anything, but like I said a minute ago, they almost beat Alabama, should have beat Alabama at Alabama. That's just terrible play calling. But yeah, I think you got a good ranking here. I agree with all of it.
Yeah. So following up the bottom 5 here, Arkansas, South Carolina, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. I've got to keep Missouri at the bottom. I think if Missouri and Vanderbilt played tomorrow, I might take Vandy to win that game because I think Vanderbilt's offense is better than Missouri's. I think Vanderbilt's offense is more productive, and their defense is getting interceptions. Like, they're getting after the quarterback. I just like the way Vandy's playing right now versus Missouri. And I think there's even a chance that Vanderbilt could beat South Carolina this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at Auburn at 12 in your ranking here. And, you know, the first few games of the season, people thought they were going to be a lot better than they have been in the last few weeks of the season. So, you know, we'll see what ends up happening with them. You know, they may figure some things out. I thought they were going to be better than they have played. But that's the thing about the SEC. Everybody looks good week 3. And then by week 7, it's like the dust starts to settle.
You've just got to look at the rest of their schedule, though. Like, they've still got to play Texas A&M. They still have to play Mississippi State. They still have to play Alabama. They still have to play Ole Miss. It just does not get easier for Auburn. No. Georgia was kind of just the beginning. So that's it. Again, Missouri all the way at the bottom, then Vanderbilt, Auburn, South Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Texas A&M, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, number 3 Alabama, number 2 Georgia, and number 1 Tennessee, which brings us to my game of the week for week 7. Alabama at Tennessee. There's the teaser for our Game of the Week episode. If you want to know more, want to hear more, stay tuned for that episode. The article's also going to drop this week. Thank you so much for listening to the SEC Recap. Don't forget to like, subscribe, get notified for new episodes each and every week. Follow us on Twitter at SEC Recap. It's great to be in the SEC.